Hi, my name is Kel and I'm a therapist and educator with a special interest in eating disorders. Come on in, take a seat, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for bite-sized content across the mental health and eating disorder spectrum. In today's video, I want to attempt to answer the question of why talking about weight and calories might be triggering for somebody with an eating disorder. This feels like a little bit more of a challenging topic to create a video about, not because it's especially emotive in any way, but because it's quite an abstract area to try and solidify, to try and make concrete and make sense for those of you that are learning about eating disorders through this video. So I would really appreciate, as I go through this video, if you would leave any feedback in the comment section as to whether this is helpful in understanding this concept, and perhaps it creates some more questions, or I could add some additional clarifications or additional information. So please leave some information, leave some responses in the comment section about that. But let's just try and get into it. So why might talking about weight and calories be triggering for somebody with an eating disorder? So you heard me say there, why might it be triggering? Because of course, not all people with eating disorders are the same. What is one person's experience is not necessarily the same as another person's experience. And when I talk about eating disorders here, I'm being as general as I can be. I'm also trying to give you as much information as possible. But of course, each individual with an eating disorder experiences it differently. And therefore you might find yourself working with somebody for whom what I talk about today isn't true, or you might personally have an eating disorder and what I'm talking about might not feel like it fits for you. And if that's the case, I am not in any way meaning to invalidate your experience, and your experience of this is absolutely okay to have, but this is kind of a general overview of how I think about this topic and how I've often heard this as a challenge talked about. So people with eating disorders often have a significant component of their disorder of comparison. That is, they compare themselves, their body, their weight, their shape, their size to that of other people, be that other people in their lives, be that to images that they see, or be that potentially even to their own body in the past. And they may also do that with food as well. They may compare the way that they eat, the types of food that they eat, the quantity of food that they eat to other people's perceptions of food or other people's literal plates of food as well. And the reason that comparison is part of an eating disorder, or a component of the reason, is that an eating disorder brain is a very rigid brain. An eating disorder brain thinks very much in black and white, right or wrong, yes or no. And so in that sense, if something isn't right, it's wrong. And there is no space for that grey area in the middle. And that means that when a person with an eating disorder looks at another individual, be that in terms of their body or be that in terms of the food, and coming from a place of significantly low self-esteem, low confidence, and lack of much assurance in themselves, they look out into the world and see other people responding to bodies and food in certain ways, they will not trust their own experience and they will pay attention to what is happening out here in the world. This is especially a problem nowadays when the majority of images that we see are in some way edited, when we have a society that is obsessed with being smaller and dieting and everything that's wrapped up there in diet culture. So the person with an eating disorder is comparing themselves to a world that really has lost all sense of what it is to have a healthy relationship with the body and the food. And that sense of comparison in the eating disorder mind is especially important. Controlling things outside of them for many people is a way of regulating how they feel internally, and many of us do that without an eating disorder as well. We externalize things to make sense of them, and that could be writing it down, that could be exercising to burn off some frustration, that could be shouting. They're all externalized ways of expressing feeling. And so that's a quite typical thing for us as human beings to do. But in the eating disorder experience, that externalization is often placed upon the way the body looks or the relationship with food. And so regulating one and or both of those might be the only way, or one of the only ways, that the person has of regulating their internal mood. And when they then look out here into the world, it seems like that's what the majority of us are doing as well. We then bring that person into treatment and support, and we tell them that what they're doing is wrong, that what they're doing is unhealthy, it's harmful. That's pretty confusing to an inflexible mind, to go home to the dinner table and hear your loved ones, perhaps your parents or your siblings or your spouse, talking about wanting to diet or wanting to lose weight or wanting to change the shape of their body, when in treatment settings we're attempting to encourage that person to listen intuitively to their body, or to allow their body to not focus on the calories or the way that the body looks, but to focus on their well-being in a less tangible and more general way. This struggle to make sense of what we're asking for in treatment versus maybe what's happening out here in the world is going to increase that person's anxiety even more. So they're experiencing probably significantly high anxiety as part of their eating disorder, and now we're asking them to make changes to the way that they're coping with their anxiety in a way that might also then create additional anxiety. See where the problem is here? And personally, I would encourage everybody not to focus on the way our body looks and calories in that sense, because I don't really think it's healthy for any of us. Diet culture is rife in our society, but I would especially encourage that in families that are caring for somebody with an eating disorder because of this problem. There is also another way that this can be a problem as well. So if we go back to that inflexible thinking in the eating disorder mind, and we think about how you might be behaving, or a loved one might be behaving, or a friend, or even just a person in passing might be behaving in relation to the body or food, the person with the eating disorder, in lacking that trust of themselves, may see, for example, one instance of, let's say, your plate of food as being smaller than theirs. And their belief is either, I want to control what I'm eating, so I should eat less than you, which is quite a common eating disorder thought. Or it could be that perhaps a care provider, a therapist or a dietitian or a doctor has said that the way that they're eating is unhealthy, and then they look at you and you're doing something similar, or maybe you're even eating less at that one moment in time. Now, in the wider context of your day, that might be absolutely not a problem. It might be part of your healthy, balanced day, but that might be what they see. That might be the only bit that they see, and the immediate bit that they have available to compare themselves to. And in that rigid thinking mind, that is a right or wrong piece of information. So that could mean to them that the food on their plate is too much to eat because the food that you're eating is less than it. And that could leave them in a situation where they will no longer eat the quantity of food that was on their plate before, because that is now in their disordered mind wrong, too much, incorrect, and they will reduce their calories or reduce their portions or whatever it was that they were seeing in that comparison. And that's going to set them a step further back, because they're not able to think about the wider picture of your day or the wider part of your life. They're able to only see this bit that they're comparing to right in this moment, that affirms or even creates a particular thought process like this in their mind. Hopefully you're seeing how this is pretty complicated and difficult to try and explain, but hopefully I'm doing an okay job of explaining it. A final way that I kind of wanted to bring in here in terms of why talking about weight and calories might be a problem is more in line with kind of the fat phobia idea. So part of what we might encourage individuals to engage with as part of the recovery journey is being accepting of their body, whatever size it might be, whether this is somebody in a bigger body or in a straight size body or in a smaller body, whether this is somebody that in their recovery is needing to gain health and weight, or whether this is somebody that's going to stay in the body that they're currently in as they go through the recovery journey, whatever point on this spectrum we're in, we're likely to be encouraging them to not follow rigid perfection, this idea that a good enough body would look in a certain way, or this idea that they're in some way better or more lovable if they look a certain way. We're really trying to get them to step away from that and to care for the body that they've got. But again, we have a society that reinforces the idea that there is a right way for our bodies to look. And this is absolutely true when it comes to looking at women's bodies, but it's also increasingly become true with masculine bodies as well. We might have concepts that we would refer to as like the thin ideal. So that's the idea that we as women are given an image of being thin as what's aspirational. And we might also have something that we would refer to as the masculine ideal, which is the idea that we're projected by the media that a guy should be muscular in build. And we're given this one image of what we're supposed to work towards. And so we're asking clients to really challenge that and to recognize that actually their worth is not in a number on a scale or in the size of their body. Their worth is in how they treat other people. Their worth is in how they treat themselves, what they do with their lives, what they mean to the people that they love, the love that they give. It's in these more abstract and, at least I think, more important components of who they are as a person and not the body that they exist in. But we do have this society that's preoccupied with our bodies. So it doesn't matter how much of a fantastic motivational talk I might give a client about this, I will be sending them back out into the world that we all exist in, where and we are constantly bombarded with images of what it means to be perfect and that we should be working towards being perfect, which is obviously not true and not definable by weight or numbers or a particular way a body looks, I certainly think. But how can we be asking a person to combat that in their own heads and to combat that almost constantly from the world around them? And so if you then start talking about your body or somebody else's body, they may very well think, well, my body is bigger than that body, or my body is smaller than that body, my body is less muscular than that body, or it's a different shape than that body that you're criticizing or the media is criticizing. I don't know if they still do it these days, but I remember when I was growing up, girls' magazines having, horrendous red circles around women's cellulite or women's curves, which is quite obscene. But that person with the eating disorder is being given those messages from outside and inside. So we're asking them to fight themselves while they very much also are having to fight the society that we live in now. And we would all benefit from having a society that did not project this idea of perfectionism. And I think gradually, very slowly over time, we are working towards being more accepting of different bodies, and we have more diverse models in some instances. I've noticed, especially in the last couple of years, that started to improve, but we definitely do still get significantly more of the other messaging. It's hard to be fighting yourself and to be fighting the world. We all need a break from the thoughts in our head, and how can we have that if those are also all around us? And how challenging to make sense of it being part of your eating disorder, a significant part of your eating disorder, and it also being part of the society that we live in. In that sense, I've certainly heard a good number of clients over the years say it almost feels like the entire world has an eating disorder because the majority of people are focused on these things. And so that is where talking about weight in particular might be triggering for an eating disorder. So I'm hoping I've kind of covered how the food aspect and how the weight aspect might feed into conversations about weight and size being triggering. But I've just got one last point, and that's in relation to more affirmative comments about food or weight, because people with eating disorders often also find affirmative or complimentary feedback about the way that they look or the way that they're behaving with food is triggering as well. And again, difficult concept to understand, because you might be looking at your client or at your loved one that has an eating disorder and might be thinking they're on the road to recovery and they're doing better, and I want to encourage them that they're eating better or they're looking healthier. But the person with the eating disorder is likely to experience that as quite invalidating, because their eating disorder isn't only about these two elements that we're talking about. I will keep harping back to the eating disorder is a mental health condition, and it's about that chronically low self-esteem, it's about that struggle to cope, it's about anxiety, it's about self-criticism, and they're just the symptoms. And so often the reason this is challenging is because when you compliment either improvements in eating or the person looking healthier, what they hear is either you're doing better, in a sense of, oh, okay, now you're better, I don't need to offer you this additional support. And that might be triggering in the sense that actually if the person is still really emotionally struggling, and that's the predominant way they know how to shout for help, and you're saying, hey, I'm noticing an improvement here, you might be scared that the support is going to back off. And that unfortunately does quite often happen in statutory services, that as the behaviours improve, that services back off, even though in terms of the psychology the person hasn't yet improved. And it might also be that the person interprets especially a compliment about the way that they look. So if you say you're looking healthier, often they might interpret that as sort of a backhanded compliment, as what you're really saying is you've gained weight. And what I have to say about that is, why do we need to comment on it? Comment on that the person seems happier, comment on that they seem more engaged or like they've got more energy, because they're the things that are really important, not the way this person or any person looks. So I feel like I'm starting to get on my soapbox, so I'm going to leave that here for today. But I really hope this helps make some sense of the question as to why might talking about weight and calories be triggering in the experience of an eating disorder. Until next time, be kind, be curious, be yourself.